Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I haven't done a Cyber Dragon video for our series since our last one, which is almost a week and a half ago. So I wanted to bring you guys a new one. So as you guys know, I have been messing with the deck, trying to change up a couple things. We've got the new format, plus we've got our experience from our last regionals. So I knew I had to change up a couple things. So we're trying a couple new things in the deck to see how they do, how they mesh with the deck. The point of this video, I'm going to try and show off some of those cards. I have some pre-recorded gameplay that I had recorded a few hours ago, and I'm going to give you guys some commentary and show you guys how these new techs kind of interact with the deck. The cards we're going to be trying out in the deck, obviously I told you guys last time I added Clockwork Knight. I was hoping to be able to show you guys how that actually changes the deck a little bit. It actually goes really good with Winda. We're also going to be taking out Book of Moon in favor of Infinite Impermanence, and we're going to see if Infinite Impermanence is a better play, because I ended up realizing that Cyber Dragon has an easier time clearing face-up monsters than it does face-down. It's just, we have Infinity to be able to absorb face-up attack position monsters. We have Cyber Altan, which can clear all the monsters on the board. It's just a few things here and there. The only card that unfortunately I did not have the time to test, because I would have had to find a whole different game, and it's in the side deck, not the main, so that's just a little bit harder, was Secret Village of the Spellcaster. But I can tell you this, at my locals I had used it, and when I had sided it in, my opponent looked at his hand and just gave up because he had 5 spells. It was kind of toxic. I felt kind of nice about it, because I ended up with Infinity Winda and Secret Village, and he just kind of scooped it up. Anyway, enough for me. Let's jump into the gameplay. Alright, so we had lost our rock, paper, scissors here, so we were forced to go second. And right off the bat, we start off with Infinite Impermanence. We're up against Pure Branded, and you start off with a Spriggan's Kit. My guess is to start your Branded Fusion. Now, I don't have an Ash, otherwise obviously I would have saved the Ash for the Branded Fusion, but I wanted to attempt to stop him from continuing, so we actually dropped the Infinite Impermanence. And look how impactful it ends up being. It basically ends his turn. If that had been a Book of Moon, he would have got to play his entire turn, and then we would have had to try and use the Book of Moon to break his board. So while I do really enjoy Book of Moon, in some cases, being able to have that interruption is better than being able to set a monster. I mean, if we had gone first, we could have set the Book of Moon to attempt to use later, but he still would have had access to his Brain Infusion play, whereas Infinite Impermanence completely shut it down. The thing about Book of Moon is that Book of Moon was really strong last format, mostly because of Kashtira, because you could easily set their monsters, stop them from getting their plus engine, stop them from going into the XYZ. It's a lot, and obviously Pearly, but our deck already has so many outs to Pearly that we don't need to lean so much one way or the other. So it might be worth taking a second look at Infinite Impermanence and Forbidden Droplets, since now that we have one less, banished deck, Forbidden Droplets does become a much stronger card. Let's continue. Now, if you guys can tell with our hand, we have a full Cyber Dragon hand, which going second is what we would prefer. We start off with Core. Our Core gets impermed. We're fine with that. We just link the Core away for Almirage. This guy follows up with Magnamut. Now, if you guys notice, he's already hurting on a hand. When he played the Spriggan's Kit, he played the Spriggan Kits out of hand. He hit us with an Imperm. Now he's dropping Magnamut. He wants to search a dragon. We're not going to let him, because he could just search Fallen Alabas and make a Mary Jade off our own monster. So we shut that down. So now he's got 2 cards going into the rest of his turn, the rest of our turn, I'm sorry. And we go into our Galaxy play to make our Infinity. Now, unfortunately, he also had an Ash. This guy had so many interruptions that he was able to Ash our Hurts, which means we don't get to go into Infinity. It was a real pain in the ass. But he was down to 1 card left for the rest of his turn. For the rest of the turn, we ended up using Duality into Rampage, which was kind of a misplay, because I have no way to get material for Rampage to begin with. So instead, I decided to go for a little bit of a cheeky play. I decided to thin out the deck a little bit. I just double checking to make sure that this was you can only use once per turn. We end up dumping Cyber Dragon and the third Galaxy Soldier, which in hindsight could have been a better play. But we go to battle phase. We actually attack with the Rampage into the kit just to clear out a monster. Now here's where things get a little spicy. Take out the kit, and then we swing into the Magnamut. Now why would we swing into the Magnamut? Pause the video, let me know in the comments if you guys can guess why I suicided my Rampage. You'll see in a second, but I just want to know if you were right. So we took some damage, we killed off our Rampage. This is why. We end up activating Duality to send back Rampage, to send back the Galaxy Soldier, in an attempt to draw something to continue, but unfortunately we actually draw into the Galaxy Soldier we just sent back. So we switch in, we link out into Secure Garner to hopefully save us some life points, and we basically just pass turn. Unfortunately, we can't do anything with what we have, but as long as we open up at least one light monster, we can kind of try and make a comeback. But he ends up using Albion to shuffle back and draw, and he actually ends up hitting the Branded Fusion, which kind of sucked. Makes Rebellion, discards his last card in hand, which is a tragedy, which is also sucked because now he gets a search. And he ends up sending that and a Fallen Albaz back to deck to make a Mary Jade. Here's where I think he got greedy. Secure Garna does absolutely nothing against his board. All you had to do is swing. Sure, he would have lost a little bit less life points, but at least he would have kept the interruption. But he sends the Albion from deck to grave to banish my monster, locking himself out of his own effect next turn, and he ends up setting a Branded Fusion off of the tragedy. I take 55. Still not enough to kill. Like I said, there was no reason to use that effect on Secure Gardener. And now the end phase, he uses Albion to set a Branded in red. Our turn goes, and we top deck Cyber Mercy, which was absolutely dope. We already have our Galaxy Soldiers, so we just need to get our Hertz to be able to go into Infinity. We kind of hesitate there because we're just, at this point, any monster could have got us to where we wanted to go, but we wanted to maximize on the number of cards and limit the number of interruptions he had. We know he has the Branded in red. I thought about grabbing the Altanin because the Altanin would have just wiped his board, but I would have had no follow-up. And then Mary Jade would have wiped the board. I thought about grabbing the core, but he also could have just, if he had any way to stop the core, then I'm up Shit's Creek without a paddle. We decided to go for the Hertz because now he needs something that can stop us from adding in order for him to actually stop our play. I even thought about Naxxter, but I had no monsters in the graveyard that were worth summoning. Go into our Galaxy Soldier. Summon Galaxy Soldier. We grab the last OG Cyber Dragon out of deck, just thinning out the deck a little bit. Activate our second. I'm wholly expecting him to summon something with the Branded in red, but he never does. I was expecting an interruption of some sort. We go into our Infinity. I'm sorry, Nova. Now, I was expecting him, if I had used Nova, for him to actually respond to it and to kill the Nova. So we just said safe side, skip it, go straight into Infinity. Now, as you could probably notice, both of his monsters are in attack mode. Speaking of which, that was another misplay that he had made the last turn when he had summoned the Magnamut. When he had summoned the Magnamut, he had put it in attack mode instead of defense. He was already on the defensive. I was going second, and he put it in attack mode. If he hadn't had the Ash and we got to Infinity, he basically just gave us a free monster or a free material. He activates the Branded in red, but now that we're on Infinity, we just negate it. This was an easy case of him waiting too long to use it. We go into battle phase and we just swing over the Magnamut. End phase 2 and proceed to end phase. Now, the rest of this game shows how strong Infinity actually is, because in a simplified game state, Infinity is just nuts. Our opponent attempted to Branded Fusion, we negate it. Our opponent ends turn. We go, we draw into Clockwork Knight. We don't have any real combo to follow up with, but we're still sitting on an Infinity. Now we proceed to battle phase. Our Infinity is pumped up by the Clockwork Knight, and he takes 3k to the face. And now, this is one of the reasons why Clockwork Knight is so good. It's not just make all the monsters affect all. It's not just make all the monsters on the board machines for contact fusion. The pump up by 500 and the debuff by 500 to our opponent is so huge for us, especially since some of our control pieces don't have a whole lot of attack points. Like right now, Cyber Dragon Infinity should be 25. He could summon almost any of the Bestials and just either swing into Cyber Dragon Infinity. There's nothing I can do about it, especially if he baits out the negate. But now, I don't think there's a single monster in the branded deck that could swing over my Infinity right now. Because there's no monster that has over. He would have to have over, what, 35 to swing in, and 35 to crash, and over that to survive the fight. And that brings me back into the point I've made about Window. The biggest problem with Window is that 2200 attack. It's so easy to just summon a monster and swing into Window and then continue your plays. It's why I lost quite a few of my games, especially with Fenrir and still at 3. It's a 2400 beater. They could literally just play it, swing, and banish another card while killing the Window. But with Clockwork Knight, Window is now at 27, and with all their monsters losing 500, they need to have a monster that has at least 3200 attack points just to crash. Also, with our Dogmatika cards, the Dogmatika monsters turn into a pretty good beatdown strategy, being that Ecclesia is 15, Maximus is 15, and Fleur-de-Lis is 25. That pumps all the Dogmatika monsters by 500. Add Clockwork Knight on top of that, and now Maximus and Ecclesia turn to 2500 beaters, whereas Fleur-de-Lis are 35. Like, it gets insane really, really fast. Like, Clockwork Knight was definitely what this deck needed. Continue. But now it's our opponent's turn again. They again drew a card, but then they just had to pass turn because they had nothing. Now we have a Dogmatika punishment. Now we have our second interruption. So we just sit on Infinity again and swing. Because an Infinity is an Omni Negate, he would need 2 cards to be able to play to actually stop our Infinity. So now he drops Infinite Impermanence, so now I think he's actually going to try and make a comeback. I'm still feeling confident because we still have our Dogmatika Punishment face down, which is also going to give us access to our Dogmatika engine by sending Titaniclad. I decided to negate it just to keep the little extra attack points, because otherwise we would have went down to 26, and that's a little bit dangerous. Our turn, we draw into Overflow, we set that, and now we have 3 interruptions. Him setting the monster was such a waste, because if he was just going to set the monster anyway, he should have just set the Imperm and tried to draw into an out. By doing that, he basically made it so he had no way to follow. Like, if he had waited on the Imperm till now, he could have Impermed Infinity, then dropped the Fright for a Patchwork. But now we're just going to negate the Patchwork. This guy suffered from a big problem of getting greedy way too fast. And look, we got another Clockwork Knight, which we would have stacked another 500. Game 2. It's the same match, but we end up having to go second since we did win. And we have a pretty nasty hand going second since we drew Clockwork Knight. Our opponent plays Fallen of Alpaz, which is really weird, going first, and does nothing with it. He just sets 1 card. So we draw into Nadir Servant, and he flips over D Barrier. I'm expecting him to call XYZs, since all he saw last game was my XYZ monsters, my fusion, my Cyber Dragon engine, but he calls fusions. And I'm like, alright, then we're just gonna beat your face in. We activate Clockwork Knight, changing everything to machines and debuffing. We summon Cyber Dragon. Obviously, we can't contact fuse. We go with Emergency, attempting to bait out a hand trap, which we do. We bait out the Ash, but we already have Galaxy Soldier in hand and a light monster. This is one of the reasons I like the Dogmatika package with the Cyber Dragon package. That could have been any monster in our deck. They're all lights, including our Dogmatika package. And we have Nadir Servant for follow-up. So even though we're down to 2 cards in hand, Nadir Servant is still alive. We end up making our Nova. We detach for Cyber Dragon to bring back. This was a misplay here. I hesitated after this. I was going to bring back Naxxor to bring back Cyber Dragon to be able to push him a little more, but I forgot that Naxxor locks you into machines if you use the effect. So I bring back the Naxter, having already selected it, but I do not choose to use this effect because I want to be able to continue with Nadir Servant. So we go into Infinity. We end up nomming the Fallen of Albaz. He attempts to Nibiru us. Obviously, we already have our Omni Negate, so we just negate it. And our opponent surrenders. Sorry, before we jump into the next game, the way that game was gonna go, we basically were going to win that turn, because with the extra 500 from Clockwork Knight, our Infinity is at 28. We were gonna summon an Ecclesia at 2k, and we would have went straight into the Fleur de Lis, which would have come out at 3k, and then on swing would have pumped himself and Ecclesia by 500. So we would have had 28, 25, and 35, which would have been enough to just end the game. And our opponent just surrendered. So now, the next game is not the same match. It's a whole separate game, but I want to show you off just a little bit more. So let's keep going. Now in this game, we got to go first, and we actually have our entire setup minus the Infinity. I'm sorry, we have our entire Dogmatika setup. So we start off with Nadir Servant, sending Garua. We're going to add Maximus since we already have Ecclesia, and then Garua is going to let us draw a card, which unfortunately we did draw into Galaxy Soldier, but we can't actually use it. We can do the Galaxy Soldier play, but it would cost all of our light monsters, and we can't even go into our extra since we already used Nadir Servant. So instead, we normal summon the Ecclesia, search out Dogmatika Punishment. Now we have another interruption. We end up summoning the Maximus, banishing the Garua. This is why I love the Nadir Servant, because it's a one card going to your whole play. We end up getting rid of Absalom and Titaniclad. Our opponent dumps 2. We always end up checking what our opponent's dumping. It was inconsequential. But we end up searching the Schism. We discard the deadest card in our hand right now, which the 2 dead cards in our hand right now are Cyberload Fusion and Galaxy Soldier. But Galaxy Soldier can give us a follow-up play on the following turn, whereas right now Cyberload Fusion is completely dead because there's no way for me to set it up. So that's the card we end up discarding. We activate Clockwork Knight, bumping up all our attack points, all our defense points, and reducing all of our opponents, which just looks nice, like 3500 Maximus. And then we just set 3, which honestly in a Cyber Dragon deck is still an insane setup. I know we don't get to see that many Cyber Dragon cards here this game because we opened up pure Dogmatika, but going first, that's what we want to see. Going second, we want to see the Cyber Dragon stuff. But now all of our opponent's monsters are reduced. I had to check this card because I didn't know what it did. And that's when I realized he was playing Draco Slayer. I actually thought I cut that out. I wanted to flip the Schism, but I decided to hold off on it. So the way this works is he picks 2 monsters, he reveals them to us, and then we randomly select one. I thought I had to manually select one, so I was going to pick this one. But once I realized I have to randomly select it, I let it go. I end up getting lucky, and that's the one I hit, so he special summons it. I wanted to already flip the Schism, but considering that I didn't know if he was going to special summon it or add it to hand, or put it into the Pendulum Scale, I didn't know if that was going to be a good idea. So I decided to hold off a little bit until he actually special summons something. He ends up making starting to make his scale with Luster. I let it go. I was going to attempt to respond to it, but I was just like, let me wait. I read its effect. He needs to basically pop a pendulum monster in the other pendulum scale. So now that he's set up his scale, this is where we decided to activate the punishment. We end up using the punishment on his monster. Since we don't need anything else, we just go with Entis, because now Entis is going to pop his scale. So now he can't pendulum someone without playing another card from hand. He's already down to 3 cards. I still have Impermanence. I still have my Window Lock. He goes with Joker to try to attempt to search, trying to rebuild his Pendulum Scale, I assume. I end up hitting it with an Infinite Impermanence. So this goes back to what I was saying in the first game. If this had been a Book of Moon, it wouldn't have stopped this play. It would have set the Joker, and he would have been able to continue to search his scale, could have played his scale, could have summoned out monsters. He might not have been able to XYZ summon, or do an alternate summoning from the extra deck with the Joker, but he would have still been able to keep playing. Impermanence here basically shuts down his play, and that is why I'm starting to lean toward impermanence again. And I decided to activate the Schism now because if he does have a follow-up play, so this was another misplay on my part. I tried to activate the Schism. I was trying to summon Winda, and I was kind of bugging out that I couldn't summon the Winda. The reason I was going to summon the Winda is that way Fleur de Lis is live because there's no extra deck monsters on the board. So Fleur de Lis can't even summon, and I wanted to have the Fleur de Lis to gate. But I had forgotten that I had already used Punishment, which locks me out of my extra deck until the end of my next turn. So that was on me. Thankfully, he couldn't do anything after that. My bad on that. I faded out the end of that video a little bit before the windscreen, but basically after he put his last second monster in the pendulum scale, he surrendered because he actually ended up putting the same monster. I don't know if that was a misplay, but he had no way to continue playing. And even if he had, we were going to go into our turn and just absolutely beat his face in with the cards we had, especially with the Clockwork Knight pumping up all our monsters. So Clockwork Knight, definitely a good add. Infinite Impermanence, definitely might have to replace Book of Moon. I love Book of Moon. It's definitely done me some cool stuff. It actually can help us dodge TC Boo a little bit because we can set our monsters and then continue playing. But Infinite Impermanence is just... it's still my favorite trap card. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Let me know if you guys know any other techs you want me to test out. I have 2 weeks until the next regional, a little over 2 weeks, so I'm trying to get some testing in. I do have a Vanguard regional coming up next week, so I'm kind of shifting gears for at least for that. But you also might see me start using Dueling Book a little more. I think, thinking back to the last regional, playing on automated simulators so much kind of put me into some bad habits where I'm not manually checking everything, I'm not manually doing everything, which I might need to start doing in preparation for the next regional because I made so many misplays at the last one that I don't want to repeat. So I think that might be a better way to practice. Obviously, we're still going to try and go to our locals, but it's neither here nor there. Again, you guys have any techs you think I should try out? Let me know down in the comments. If you guys want to check me out on social media, link to that will be down below. Thanks again for all your support. This series has pretty much blown up. That is it for me. I'll check you guys in the next video. Later.